Greetings, Dr. McKnight, executive staff, board members, principal colleagues, MCPS students, staff, community members, and elected officials. I am Rashonda Piles, the proud principal of Rockville High School, home of the Rams. When you are in our building, you are considered to be a part of our Ramily. So it is with excitement that I have this opportunity to welcome each of you to our school for an essential message and call to action by our very own Dr. Monifa McKnight. What a wonderful audience. We have many distinguished guests with us today. Let me begin by recognizing our Montgomery County Board of Education members. Please stand to be recognized when I call your name. Carla Silvestri, Board President. Shebra Evans, Board Vice President, and board members, Brenda Wolf, Rebecca Smondrowski, Lynn Harris, Julie Yang, Grace Rivera Oven. Student member of the board, Arvin Kim. Also, former board member, Judy Daka. Thank you for being here. Also, Senator Nancy King and delegates Jared Solomon, Julie Palakovich-Carr, and Janelle Wilkins. Representing U.S. Congressman Jamie Raskin, we have Erica Fuentes. Montgomery County Council members, Will Jawando and Andrew Friedson. And Sydney Katz and Kate Stewart. If there are other council members present, please stand to be recognized. Also, our county Chief Administrative Officer, Richard Madalino. Thank you for being here. You are all distinguished guests who represent many interests, and we recognize you for the work that you do to support our students and our school system. A special thank you to my Rockville High School student ambassadors and Minority Scholars Program students who greeted you upon entering the building. They will be here to assist you this afternoon with any of your needs. And one more shout out to my amazing building services team for the preparation for this momentous event. I stand before you today proud that our system is led by someone who speaks up and against racism and hate. If it's true what the immortal Dr. Martin Luther King exhorted, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Then it's because of courageous leaders like Dr. Monifa McKnight. Rarely in my professional and personal life have I had the opportunity to introduce a passionate and visionary leader like Dr. McKnight, an advocate for children, staff, and equity. She is truly a transformative educational leader determined to elevate MCPS to its greatest potential. Without further ado, I present to you our amazing superintendent, Dr. Monifa McKnight. Absolutely.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. It is so good to see you here, and I first want to begin by thanking you for taking time to come together this evening as a community. And I'm going to start with something that many of you have seen, and if you've received any type of information from MCPS, take note that inscribed atop Montgomery County Public Schools official documents, letters, parchment, our community encounters a reminder of our system's core values: excellence, equity, respect, learning, and relationships. All of us in this room and across our world-class school system reach for those values every day. We move towards them, but we rarely, if ever, fully achieve them. What we seek to do is close the gap between who we profess to be, who we want to be, and who we really are. In 2020, as America found itself amid a national racial reckoning in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, it was not enough for Montgomery County Public Schools to merely take a stance against racism and bigotry and hate, or to just condemn these forces, or to simply state our raw shock and disbelief and horror. With our students and staff grieving, they were taking to our streets in agony and calling on us to do better. And it would fall flat to stand idly and observe our nation's problems with race and their manifestations in our own community. And floating in that sea of anguish, there was an opportunity right here in Montgomery County Public Schools. An opportunity to examine how close we truly are to who we hope to be. And so that's why we then commissioned the anti-racist audit. Because beneath every stone we turned over, on every indicator of student opportunity, we found undeniable racial disparities that have existed for decades. Disparities that carry with them the weight of shortchanged student potential and unrealized student dreams. And at the heart of why we launched the anti-racist audit, it was a commitment to uncover how our school system's policies, practices, and structures must change, how we must change, so that all 162,601 of our students are wrapped in belonging from the very moment they walk through our school doors. And belonging requires that our schools and classrooms and offices are all places where our values of excellence and equity and respect and learning and relationships all come alive. Then and now, the vast majority of our students and staff embody these tenets every day. Over the last few months, we've been reminded of why our school system launched this audit, of why we committed ourselves to belonging here in MCPS. Because the recent actions of a few have shaken us. We've woken up to headlines about heartbreaking incidents in our schools and our community. Students spewing bigoted language degrading the color of their peers' skin, ethnic heritage, gender identity, or faith, drawing symbols of hate that leave their peers shocked, startled, and hurting, and posting profane, homophobic, and outright mean, disrespectful, and ignorant content on social media. Let me be clear. These unacceptable actions have no place in MCPS. They must be called out and not allowed. We're called together today because the unfortunate reality is that these sorts of actions have become more and more common. This year alone, our schools are home to over 1 incident a day on average, a rate that triples what we have seen in the past years and even before COVID-19. So, my friends, We're in 2023, and the reality is that race matters. Religion matters. Disability matters. Gender identity and sexual orientation matter. And they matter at a time when forces of hate and bias continue to tear us apart and pull at the very fabric of our community. At any particular moment, headlines and newscasts detailing the killing of a Black man, the assault of an Asian American, the crude mocking of an individual with a disability, or the defamation of property with messages promoting the exclusion of Jews, can bring a particular form of hate to the forefront of our national discourse. Because events bring with them a real emotional salience. Yet, concentrating at any given point on a particular form of hate does not eliminate the unjust presence of its forms. And let me say that one more time. Concentrating at any given point on a particular form of hate does not eliminate the unjust presence of its other forms. In our own community, some have suggested that our recent focus on combating anti-Semitism comes at the cost of attention to anti-Black racism, anti-LGBTQ+ discrimination, anti-Asian American Pacific Islander hate, anti-disability hate, and the other slew of maladies that we have yet to put to rest in our schools and communities and offices. And I come before you to assure you that this is not the case. And actually, I'll give you an example. If I was out bike riding with two students, we're riding along, and one trips over the curb and falls off of that bike, what am I going to do? I am going to stop, and I am going to pay attention to that student who may be hurt. That's what I'm going to do, because that student at that time needs my attention and may need medical attention, but I have to stop and examine what's happening at that very moment. And so that is the same perspective I take in the care and concern for every student in the system. We often talk about equity, and equity does not mean equal. It means providing every child with what they need at that moment. And it's our job to know what they need in that moment. So I want to remind us of that. And I'm also going to ask this question. Raise your hand if you have more than one child. Okay, very good. And they all need something different. So we have to pose the question, how did we get here? For starters, we must acknowledge that the erosion of positive and civil discourse has had real consequences. Our words matter. At their best, what we say and how we say it breathes signs of welcome and affirmation. And at their worst, our words can demean, degrade, and divide. Now, schools alone cannot repair the permission our culture grants words to be weaponized for harm. But we also can't throw our hands up. Walking hand in hand with our families, parents, community, and partner groups, we can stand up and act. Starting at the very top with our district leaders, our school leaders, and me, stand up and act in our condemnation of these attitudes and actions. Stand up and act in rejection of complacency and in refusal to turn our backs to injustice in any form. Stand up and act with the help of strong systems that alert us when our values have been compromised. We can stand up and act by doing what we do best, educating. We can and must educate one another about the value of our diversity, the importance of inclusivity, and what it takes to bring our students the sense of belonging that I've personally searched for and fought for my whole life. So with that, allow me to speak to you for a moment, not as your educator, nor as your superintendent, but as Monifa McKnight. I am a daughter of the South, many of you know, hailing from Orangeburg, South Carolina. And in Orangeburg, I grew up there, and then there was black and there was white. There was the black side of town and the white side of town. There was the black church and the white church. And on any given Sunday, you could find most of the town in one or the other, but never together. And so growing up in Orangeburg, there was plenty of room for racial ignorance and difference to cloud my potential. But as with so many sons and daughters of the African American community, I grew up with a strong and very fierce mother who herself was one of 11 children. And coming from very little, she went on to cook on the line for all of the students at South Carolina State University, the small local HBCU that I would later attend. And it was amazing to watch her do what she did. And as she went to work, and she was a mother in my home, she always instilled upon us the importance of service to others. And if you can, you should. And it should never be optional if you can help someone else who is in need of help. And I am grateful for that lesson. And that is the lesson that sticks with me every single day that I get up to come in and serve this community, our community. And going back to Orangeburg, it was in my family in that small town and my faith that taught me that hard work was just how you would get through the day. But pair hard work with a servant's heart, and lofty ambitions were then truly possible. So, 22 years ago, I took my lofty ambitions and brought them right here to Montgomery County to teach what is now the Parkland Magnet Middle School for Aerospace Technology. And it's also in this region that I married a young man at that time from Harlem, New York. And I became the mother of a now 11-year-old son who reminds me every day that I owe all children the same promise that I make to him, and that is to help them live up to their boundless potential. And living up to our potential, that is the human project. And as educators, that is the project of our schools and our school system. That's our project. For MCPS, our project began 163 years ago in a school system that, like many others in the United States, was exclusively built for white students. In 1872, the state established a separate public school for black students, with our first high school for black students opening in 1927. a full 35 years after the first high school for white students opened. And it wasn't until 1961, a full 6 years after Brown versus the Board of Education, that our school system would declare integration complete. And as many would argue, complete in name only. As the school system was desegregating, it was also growing. Between 1950 and 1972, enrollment more than quadrupled from 27,000 students to 127,000 students. But as the school system was growing larger, it wasn't necessarily growing more diverse. When our enrollment peaked in the 1970s, MCPS was still 91% white. That began to change in the 1980s. It was then that immigration began to account for a significant amount of the county's growth, and the school system also began to become more diverse as we welcomed more Hispanic and Asian families, while also increasing the share of the African American population. We became more diverse not only in color, but also in the countries our residents came from, the churches and synagogues and mosques they attended, whom they loved, and the size of their residents' wallets. Here, in one of the richest countries in the world, in one of the richest states in the country, in one of the richest counties in the state, poverty started to climb. Montgomery County's embrace of families from across the country and the globe in recent decades has made us one of the most beautifully diverse school systems in the United States of America. As we have grown in difference, we have so often said the right thing, proclaiming our affinity for diversity, codifying policies and regulations of non-discrimination, equity, and cultural proficiency, condemning acts of hate and bias, staging town halls that bring our communities together to bask in our sense of shared pride for our LGBTQ+ community. And in many, many ways, we have done the right thing. As a district, we were early adopters and champions of equity. We've given more resources to our students with more need. Our students have led in affinity groups as members of the Minority Scholars Program, Black student unions, and leadership organizations like MoCo Pride for our LGBTQ+ students, and Empower Her for emerging female leaders. And while all of us as students, staff members, and community members have so often done the right thing, we're currently reminded of how far we still have to go. Because we have not always done the right thing by how we have treated one another on the basis of religion, race, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Incidents of anti-Semitic actions against our Jewish students have arisen almost daily in our schools. Students have arrived to school to find Nazi symbols scribbled on their desk, graffiti declaring that Jews are not welcome on their school's marquee, and imitations of the Nazi regime spread across their social media platforms. These incidents mirror what we are seeing across the state and the nation. According to the Anti-Defamation League, the nation saw a 36% rise in anti-Semitic incidents, including a 98% increase in Maryland and a 261% spike right here in Montgomery County. In light of the very real trends that we are experiencing, I have gone out to the Jewish community to listen, to really listen. And I've heard our Jewish students and families open up about the real fear that has overwhelmed them in the face of hate and feelings of dread. Some students have had their kippas taken off of their heads. Other Jewish students shared stories of their peers taking stereotypes of Jewish people so far as to throw pennies at them. Even the casual mimicking of the same images, words, and symbols that were weaponized for the genocide of Jewish people less than a century ago demonstrates a gross ignorance of history. And for many of our Jewish students, issues painful reminders of personal and family connections to that horrific atrocity. Is it any wonder, then, that some of our Jewish students and staff are genuinely afraid to come to class or to go to work? And they are not alone. We also can't ignore that our staff and students who practice Islam harbor similar worries. Many are concerned that they will be targeted when they put on their hijab or head covering. And they fear that their participation in academic and extracurricular activities will be compromised as they fast during the month of Ramadan. Just as our Jewish community has called on us to incorporate more Holocaust studies into our curriculum, our friends in the Islamic community, the Buddhist community, the Hindu community, and across denominations of the Christian community rely on our schools to provide secular lessons about the virtues, teaching, and ethics of their creed. And indeed, we are responsible for teaching students about the history of various faith traditions, in part so that students can understand the deep pain that disrespect and teasing can inflict, and also so that they understand why disrespect and teasing contradict the mutual respect and tolerance that so many of those faiths actually teach. We are painfully aware that prejudice continues to be directed at students in our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities. In 2016, when Bethesda Chevy Chase High School decided to shift away from a homecoming king and queen and towards a homecoming court that removed gender and sexual orientation from the selection criteria, it was a big deal that People magazine even showcased it as a part of their barometer of popular culture. Today, that is the norm. And I am proud that Montgomery County helped rewrite that norm. And while that may not be the way that my homecoming was set up, or how my mother's was, I have to ask, why shouldn't it be more inclusive? For some, fear of this sort of difference has created a hostility towards our students in the LGBTQ+ community, making them feel unwelcome, or as if they cannot bring their authentic selves into their schools and classrooms, and as if they have to come out and announce their gender or sexual preference because the world silently nags at anyone who differs from a single type of gender expression or love. Recently, some in the media have gone so far as to ask, why does MCPS include text by LGBTQ+ authors and with LGBTQ+ characters in our curriculum? Yet the question should be, why are we just now including these texts in our curriculum? And why has it actually taken so long? The inclusion of texts from a wide variety of authors and a wide variety of characters is an essential element of any world-class library, classroom, or curriculum. Not only for creating a sense of belonging for LGBTQ+ students, but also for promoting understanding and acceptance among all students. And as one student wrote to me, if a young me had been able to read any book with LGBTQ+ characters, I would have accepted who I am sooner and felt less ashamed and less confused. So indeed, let us be a school system in which students are exposed to materials that allow them to feel less shame and less doubt in favor of more pride and more confidence in who they are and what they can achieve. Our students deserve to be filled with that pride and confidence, regardless of gender and sexuality, regardless of religion, and regardless of race. So, we have inherited a system that was designed for white students who lived in white neighborhoods and were taught by white teachers, only later to be opened for all other students. And history matters in how we treat students for whom the system was not originally built. So just as we have inherited those systems, we will now pass down the system and culture and values that our children and grandchildren will inherit. Their futures lie in our hands. And so we must ask the question, what will our legacy be? And in crafting that legacy, our affirmation of Black, Hispanic, Asian, and multiracial students' full humanity must be overcome in the face of serious social inequities. Our school's role in doing so demands that our adults show our students respect and positive regard so that our students, in turn, may cultivate positive self-respect and positive self-regard. Both of these are undermined when institutionalized forces give rise to interpersonal behavior directed towards students as hatred and bias. Epithets and slurs are obvious examples of the wrongful treatment of students of diverse backgrounds in our schools. For too long, African American students have been confronted with the N-word while walking innocently to class. For too long, Asian American Pacific Islander students have dealt with simmering racism that boiled over during the pandemic. For too long, Hispanic students have had to answer unfair questions about places they come from or do not come from. For too long, multiracial students have been told that by not fitting squarely into one category or the other, they lack a place in our schools. And for too long, our students of color have questioned whether our valued police partners were a presence not only to keep them safe, but to also keep them in check. So let me repeat what I said earlier. These unacceptable actions have no place in MCPS. They must be called out and not allowed. Because only then can we begin to disrupt the cycle of pain that have compounded generation over generation, so often stacking hurt upon hurt and trauma upon trauma. As just one example of this hurt and trauma, Black and Hispanic students are time and again subjected to what is sometimes called the soft bigotry of low expectations, but what I would consider more accurately the piercing bigotry of low expectations. And stemming from that piercing bigotry, some have accused our school system of being in a decadent decline, with our demographic breakdowns as the only evidence they have to point to. What these skeptics see as a source of our decline, I see as a source of our incline. And my challenge to us today is to not just hold that commitment, but to act on that commitment. And to act on it while holding ourselves to the same high expectations that our students so desperately deserve. Now, I am not so naive to think that I can snap my fingers and get rid of hate and bias. Nor am I so naive as to think that those efforts will be straightforward or somehow less complicated under the leadership of an African-American superintendent. And I'm going to say that I'm going to venture to believe that some think that because I am an African-American superintendent, I can make it happen quickly. And I promise you, if I could, I would. For myself, for my child, and for the experience of so many others I know have had that have made the journey difficult. But I also refuse to concede to the cynics who claim that the sort of hate and bias we are seeing is an inevitable, irreparable byproduct of embracing the pluralistic and multicultural and multi-ethnic project that democracy demands of our schools. I know that we can do this in Montgomery County. We can do better because I have seen better time and again in the 21 years that I have devoted to the school system. I have seen better in the determined faces of our students who have organized walkouts to say that anti-Semitism and hate have no place in our schools. I've heard better in the affirmation that our LGBTQ+ students and their peers have offered one another. I have felt better in the energy that our students bring to the Minority Scholars Program, who so rightfully declared at their recent retreat, "We are the blueprint of the future." And I have to tell you, I understand that the blueprint is here in the room today. If you are here and a part of our Minority Scholars Program, please stand. Our students are our model examples. And I often say, if we listen and watch them, we will learn a lot. Thank you, students, for your work, your commitment, your leadership always. And I've gotten to know better in particular students, like Isabella Andrade. She's a senior at Quince Orchard High School, whose parents immigrated to the United States as children from Honduras and Ecuador and enrolled in MCPS schools upon their arrival. Their experience actually inspired Isabella to, in her words, fight to create a school system that was better than the one her parents experienced. Now, 14 advanced placement classes later, and with leadership positions in nearly every major student organization, Isabella has an acceptance letter from Harvard under her belt and leaves behind an indelible legacy stretched across MCPS. Isabella is here, and I see her. Could you please stand? So proud of her and her story. And that's why we must tell our stories. And I've also witnessed better in students like Grant Scott. Grant is a graduating senior at Wheaton High School who spends his mornings at an apprentice at our MCPS print and graphics shop. Grant recently used the career training he received in print operations from our Thomas Edison High School of Technology to produce stunning banners that adorn our county's historic celebration of the Divine Nine Council of Black Greek organizations. When he graduates this spring, Grant plans to continue working full-time in our print shop while he pursues higher education. And unfortunately, Grant is recovering from an operation and he cannot join us this afternoon, but he is watching, and we are so proud of him. Thank you. Thank you. Time and again, our students and staff offer us irrefutable evidence that the sparks of innovation, care, and compassion for fellow students, the exhibits of consummate excellence, are alive in our school system every day. We know our students are capable of becoming outstanding, compassionate citizens. And we also recognize that misguided actions and attitudes that stand in their way are not intractable. Young people do make mistakes. That's a part of growing up. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you can think of one mistake you made as a child that you wish you had not. And I'm going to ask you to be honest. And I would expect that that would be every hand in this room. So we all look back on things that were disappointing that we did as children. But I believe that students can change. I have to believe that. All of the adults who work with our students have to believe that, because otherwise, education would be a futile enterprise. What is important is not who a student is at a given point in time, but who they become when they leave us. Now, let me be clear about this. I am not excusing behaviors or actions, nor dismissing the need for consequences and discipline. Another lesson I learned from my mother. In fact, fair and appropriate discipline plays an important role in how students will become better versions of themselves. Fair and appropriate means that parents are a presence in our schools in confronting issues together with their child in a conversation with school administrators. But it does not mean publicly shaming our students or conveniently convincing ourselves that we can suspend our way out of this. At the same time, we have to stop just reacting. Stop addressing these incidents one at a time. This is one reason why we have commissioned the comprehensive anti-racist audit in the first place. And that's why we are acting on the audit's findings on the basis of our theory of action, a strategy for change that proposes that if we differentiate resources to meet specific needs of schools and communities, build staff capacity to create anti-racist learning environments in which all students can learn and thrive, and consistently utilize structures of accountability, then the expectations for what students and adults should know and be able to do will be clear. Adult expertise will increase, and student outcomes will improve. And in line with that strategy, MCPS is embarking upon a series of critical actions that we are undertaking in response to all hate, bias, and discrimination along the lines of race, religion, gender expression, sexual orientation, or any other personal characteristic. Some of this work is well underway, some is in development, and some will be launched in the near future. Moving forward, we will do more in our continued fight against all hate. First, we will be tightly coordinated to prevent and respond to incidents of hate and bias. Diluting responsibility leaves too much to chance. We will identify key experts in equity, cultural proficiency, and non-discrimination to respond to incidents and strictly scrutinize our system's decisions for evidence of equity. Second, right now, and it will continue. Third, we will help all of the adults in our school system recognize and respond to hate and bias through training on hate and bias that all staff will engage in for next school year, and we will repeat this every year. Fourth, we have to bring our community to the table always, our whole community. Schools cannot do this alone and should not do it alone. That's why we will put a multicultural advisory group in place to monitor the Anti-Racist System Action Plan, model positive public discourse, and partner with our school system to educate families on how hatred is spread through forces like social media, popular culture, and gaming. Fifth, we will do what we do best: teach. Teach our students about the role that hate and bias has played across history. We are currently revising our 4th and 5th grade curriculum to align with social justice standards and teach students about the role that upstanders and bystanders have played throughout history. All 4th and 5th grade teachers will be trained in how to teach the sort of lessons that will marry historical context and character building, so that we can next make the chapter in history a history one that represents upstanders. And 6, we will establish opportunities throughout our students' school days to learn about these issues. They're going to do that in assemblies, through student advisory boards, and in the classrooms. So, there is more to come on the steps that we will be taking as a school system. More to come in the comprehensive anti-racist system action plan that will be presented and in front of our Board of Education and to the community in our May 11th meeting. And I would like to thank our board members for their commitment and strength to keep the school system strong and thriving for our students and community. But for now, I want to remind us of 2 thoughts that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. left us with. First, in the title of his final book, Dr. King posed a question that we once again confront at this very moment. And that is, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And today, I am calling on us to opt for community. and to opt for a community that holds sacred a public discourse that our young people can listen closely to and absorb lessons in how to, one, build understanding upon encountering differences, how to shed toxicity in favor of affirmation, and call out and isolate and remedy sparks of prejudice before they actually erupt. Because how we talk to one another holds reverberating implications on the future of our democracy, especially how we talk about race, religion, creed, gender, and sexuality. And second, in 1968, on that famous evening in Memphis, Tennessee, before he was killed, Dr. King further envisioned what community looks like in professing that we as a people will get to the promised land. To Dr. King, the promised land is a community where we no longer need to beg for dignity or justice or belonging, where dignity and justice and belonging are a right, not a privilege. I believe that we can reach the promised land, and I believe that its laboratory is the American schoolhouse, where we work to cultivate the hearts and minds of our young people. As we have seen over the history of our school system, and especially in recent months, there are many negative forces competing for those young hearts and minds, namely the forces of prejudice and self-doubt. Yet we must never tire of fighting to inch ever closer to our values, to instill excellence, respect, and compassion in the citizens of tomorrow, our students. And as a school system, that is our common goal, our common destiny. And it is by having that goal that the central focus of our wonder of what a better future looks like and the hard work to make it a reality, that we must define who we are in that process. And that starts this evening, and it starts with us, every single one of us, and right now, for our children. I thank you in advance for your partnership. I thank you for your understanding, and I thank you for your commitment on this journey that we will walk together and we will be successful in right here in our beloved Montgomery County, and particularly here in our Montgomery County Public School System. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you.